Hey, what's up guys? IU back here with one more Legion Raid support guide video. Unlike the last one, I've basically taken my live Vykas runs from stream and I've picked out a selection of clips that I thought would be useful in showing you guys some of the advanced support tactics or ways that you can really kind of carry a team as a support in the Vykas Legion raid. I won't really be going over the basic mechanics of the fight or anything like that, so if you're not already familiar with the fight, I would recommend going and learning the mechanics beforehand with another YouTube video. Now, I've also covered the mechanics of the Vykas fight in depth on my stream, so if you're interested in watching the VODs, I'll leave a link in the description below. So here we're on the purple side of Vykas Gate 1, and if you didn't already, the two parties get split up into different sides. On the purple side, you actually have to stand inside all of the purple telegraphs, so it takes a bit of rewiring of your brain, which you're probably used to dodging the AoEs. And so in this first clip, he's doing what's called the feather pattern. You'll actually hear a sound cue before he does it, or of him laughing, and when you hear that, you know that he's going to do this feather pattern. If you're on the purple side, this is actually a really good pattern, as it's free DPS, you don't have to go anywhere. However, in this clip, I see one of my party members running towards the outside, and I get scared that he actually doesn't know about the telegraph because I'm in a learning party, so I go ahead and Rhapsody him just in case, but luckily he manages to figure it out in time. And so I chose this as the first clip because it really illustrates what you kind of have to do as a support in Vykas. A lot of the way that you can carry as a support in Vykas, especially since the patterns hurt a lot, is understanding the attack patterns and being able to quickly tell what pattern the boss is using, where the safe spot is, and where the danger spots are, and then looking to see who's in the danger spots. You'll start to see this as a theme going forward. As a support, you're basically always looking out for who is about to get hit, predicting in advance, and then using one of your defensive abilities to mitigate the damage. The next series of clips we'll look at covers the donut attack pattern. The boss will fly up in the air and rain down these meteors, and you have to dodge the meteors while also staying in the safe area. Now, if you're not in one of the safe areas, you take continuous AoE damage from the pulses that cover most of the map. However, as a tanky support with heavy armor, and if you have a shield especially, you can actually go out into the danger area and survive with super armors like Rhapsody. That way you can give more space for your team to run around in the circle. Ideally, nobody really has to run around and you can just move slightly to the left and right to dodge this pattern. However, sometimes he does the donut pattern in the corner, which greatly reduces the amount of space you have available. If you're a support and you can quickly identify that people don't really have room or people are running around like headless chickens, you can take the initiative and go out into the danger zone and just survive with your shields or super armor or whatever you have available. The next few clips we'll look at cover a pretty common pattern in Vykas Gate 1, and I'll just call this the axe kick, charge, turnaround pizza. I know it's a mouthful, but basically, just like Valtan, in Vykas there's a lot of combo patterns, and although all of these look like 3 different attacks, they're actually part of one combo, so you should memorize it as such. Now in Vykas Gate 1, if you find yourself in the purple party, it's actually kind of easy because there are no mechs in the purple party, whereas the blue side has to do a lot of mechanics. But the trade-off is that the boss in the purple side has more HP and does a lot more damage. So as a support, if you find yourself in the purple side, you can really make a big difference here by making sure that you know the patterns and covering for party members who might get hit by stray attacks. For example, in this case, whenever I see the axe kick and charge, I'll always look to position myself in front of the boss when he turns around, because I know that's where the safe spot is. However, at this moment, I'm not really looking at where I am, but I'm looking to see which of my DPS are not in the safe cone. A lot of people will forget that the safe spot is in front of the boss, or they might not know the pattern entirely, in which case you can easily tell who's out of position and pre-position your Rhapsody or Godsend Law and save them from a lot of damage. Also, in Vykas Gate 1 especially, there are a lot of random, kind of wonky hitboxes. So in the second clip, you can see that the boss is doing this pattern right against the wall. In this clip, it looks like everyone's in the safe zone, but a lot of DPSs will continue to attack even through this pattern once they see that they're in the safe zone. However, a lot of their animations might actually cause them to move outside of the safe zone or extend their hitbox far enough that they get hit by this attack. So as a bard, if you recognize that the boss is using this pattern in a kind of weird place, you can precast Rhapsody on top of everyone just in case one of the DPS stretches a little too far or gets clipped by one of the wonky hitboxes. In the last clip, you can see how the hitbox is actually larger than the indicator itself, and as well, the attack actually persists even after the indicator disappears, meaning that even after you see the wave come out, if you walk too quickly on top of it, you can actually still get hit by the lingering hitbox. As a support, a well-timed Rhapsody or Godsent Law can save a lot of DPS who are not aware of these kind of quirky mechanics. The next set of clips we'll look at covers the Velganus mechanic. Now, this is only a mechanic in Vykas hard mode, so if you're only attempting normal, you don't have to worry about this mechanic at all. Basically, in Vykas hard gate 1, anytime the boss teleports to the center, you want to follow him, as it's very possible he's doing the Velganus mechanic. The reason you want to follow him is that he does a very large AoE with a safe spot in the center of the map. After the AoE, you want to immediately run to your corner, wait for the ball to reach you, take your ball, and then complete the Velganus mechanic like you should probably be used to by now in the Guardian raid. There's a couple things to know here. In this first clip, you can see that somebody doesn't actually make it out of the middle, and the reason you want to run as fast as possible away from the center is that he spawns a large purple AoE that does incredible damage. Now, as a support, this is where you really want to be paying attention. After the Velganus pattern, everyone should stack at 6 o'clock, and the only reason you want to do this is so that your support player can quickly scan everyone to make sure they have the shield or not. If you didn't know, you get a shield by completing the Velganus mechanic properly, and the shield is what lets you survive the massive AoE attack that the boss does. If you don't have the shield, the only way you can survive is by getting a damage reduction, shield, or time stopping in order to live through the explosion. Now, a support can single-handedly save you, so it's good to stack at 6 o'clock so your support can check whether everyone has a shield or not. If you're not sure, you can just look at everyone's character model and the shield looks like a little golden bubble around them. If you see that someone does not have a bubble, or if you just want to be safe, you can use Guardian Tune and Rhapsody of Light as a bard, or you can use the Holy Land or Godsent Law as a paladin. In the third clip, I can see that the Gun Lancer does not have the shield, so I just give him a Guardian Tune, and combined with his own Nulla, he survives easily. In this last clip, I was demonstrating what not to do on stream and missing the ball on purpose. As you can see here, I don't have a shield, but I can survive pretty easily with just a Rhapsody of Light. Of course, if you're not a support or your support has no abilities on cooldown, you can just use a time stop potion that will let you live through the explosion as well. Now, the next series of clips we'll look at is another really common pattern that it's good to know. This is the laser, 3 lines, pizza pattern. All 3 of these moves are connected in a similar combo, so you really want to get this down. And in the first clip, you can see that after he teleports, you want to get behind him as he'll do a large 270-degree pizza that will hit everywhere except for the slice behind him. You can see me Rhapsodying of Light in advance, and this is what I was talking about before with the wonky hitboxes. You can see that everyone's actually behind him in the safe spot, but one of my War Dancer's moves pushes him out into the lingering hitbox and he gets hit. However, because the Rhapsody effect lasts for 3 seconds, he barely takes any damage, if at all. In the second clip, you can see the same pattern, however, this is on the purple side, and if you know by now, everything in the purple side is basically reversed, so you want to dodge the laser, stand on the 3 lines, and instead of going behind him, you want to stack right in front of the boss. Again, just like with the axe kick, charge, turnaround, cone pattern, you want to make sure you're walking towards a safe spot and at the same time scanning to make sure nobody's out of position. You can see here I precast Rhapsody of Light behind or near the boss just in case any of my DPS forget and are still hitting the boss behind him in what they think is the safe spot. Even if everyone looks like they're in the safe spot, you can still precast Rhapsody of Light here, because remember, the boss has a lot of wonky or lingering hitboxes, and some animations can actually push you into the attack even after it's over. If you didn't really believe me about how much the boss actually hurts in this phase, keep in mind that everyone in my party is 1475 and above, and in this clip here I actually use Nineveh during this pattern because it's a really long pattern and basically you have a guaranteed shot at landing the sidereal, so you can actually see me making a pretty big mistake in this clip. I wasn't paying much attention because Nineveh was blocking half my screen, and so while I'm in the safe zone, I normally would be looking to see who is out of position and looking to Rhapsody them. However, in this clip, I wasn't playing too well, and you can see I actually don't cast Rhapsody at all. Well, my 2 DPS don't make it inside the safe zone, and watch what happens to them. As you can see, the Sork was about 60% HP, and the War Dancer was about 70 to 80% HP, and they both die in, well, 1 or 2 seconds from getting hit by this pattern. If I was paying attention and Rhapsodied them, I would have been able to save them. Luckily for me that the other party also wiped at the same time, so it didn't really matter, but this is definitely a mistake on my part. We can see the same pattern again in this last clip, and here I was worried about my Sorceress who seemed to be out of position, so rather than me going into the safe spot, I stayed behind and I Rhapsodied in front of the boss just in case he didn't quite make it or his spacebar wasn't up. Luckily he had a spacebar, but this clip will demonstrate another thing that is quite good to think about as a support. A lot of the times you have the option to get into the safe spot yourself and then cast a protective ability, or you can stay behind to soak the attack while also casting a protective ability. And in a lot of cases, our first reaction might be to get to the safe spot yourself first and then cast an ability, but sometimes doing that delays your protective ability long enough that the person you are trying to save dies anyway or gets hit anyway. As a support, you can kind of think about it like, if you get hit by a lot of attacks, especially if you have any level of heavy armor, it's very unlikely that you will die in one shot or even die at all. And so a lot of the times it can be the correct play to stay behind and soak the attack like I'm doing here with Rhapsody instead of trying to get to the safe spot first. And you'll be able to see this in a few more clips later as well. The next set of clips we'll look at covers the front and back pattern in Gate 1. Now there's 2 different kinds of this depending on what side you're on. If you're on the blue side, the boss will do front and back, and then he'll change directions and do it one more time. If you're on the purple side, the boss will do front back, he'll teleport once, and then he'll do front and back again. So all of them come in pairs. However, in the purple side, the boss teleports, and in the blue side, the boss only changes directions on the spot. Now, if you see the front and back pattern coming out, as a support, it's really good to cast Guardian Tune because the cone is quite big, and a lot of DPS players get greedy and start hitting the boss, and they actually end up taking the attack by accident. In the other case, most people just can't dodge it, and they get hit by the large AoE. Guardian Tune just helps to negate a lot of the damage. As a paladin, again, you can use your Heavenly Blessing if you have it available because that also gives damage reduction. You'll also see me using Window Music or Rhapsody of Light to help shield and protect DPS who I think are out of position. It's quite easy to tell where he's going to shoot the cone because of the head and back indicator, so if you see anyone that's standing in the path, you can just quickly toss them a Rhapsody or Godsent Law. The next set of clips we'll look at is the Airstrike Magic Circles attack, whatever you want to call it. This isn't so much of a support tip as it is a general tip for dealing with this pattern, but if you didn't know, basically after 3 or 4 explosions, there's a large AoE circle that spawns under you, and a lot of people will waste their spacebar here trying to dodge it. However, this large magic circle is actually a donut, so if you just stand still and stay in the center of it, you won't get hit at all. This is really important, especially as a bard, because you really don't want to burn your spacebar as you have no other means of mobility. If you waste your spacebar getting out of this donut attack, it's very possible that you'll get targeted by the large red AoE afterwards and take a lot of damage. Of course, if you have Rhapsody of Light, again, you can soak it with Rhapsody of Light, but then you have to burn your Rhapsody just for yourself, or if you've been using Rhapsody a lot, it might be on cooldown. The best thing to do is to stay still, wait for the donut attack to finish, and then calmly walk out of the red AoE. If it looks like you won't make it in time, you still have your spacebar available to dodge. Okay, next we'll look at a bunch of clips that show another common pattern. This is the double punch into the cross or the double punch into the sweeping kick. Now this pattern is actually a little bit confusing for new players because the startup pattern looks the same. The first thing you want to pay attention to is whether or not he flexes his wings and flies up in the air before he punches. If you look at it carefully, he'll first flex his wings and fly up, and then he'll do 2 punches. If he does this, that means he's either going to follow up with a cross slam or do nothing entirely. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can also see that his body is glowing if he does this pattern. In the other pattern where he does a sweeping kick, his body does not glow. The reason it's confusing is because when you hit the boss with an attack, he flashes, so the flashes can get really confusing. A lot of people have trouble differentiating between the flashes of damage and the actual glow, so you can use the wing flex tell as an easier way to tell what he's doing. Now if he just starts punching randomly without doing the wing flex and you can see that his body is not glowing, that means he's going to be doing the sweeping kick. And the sweeping kick actually does a ton of damage, especially in hard mode, so you really want to be cognizant as a bard or paladin of who is going to be caught by the sweeping kick and get ready to Rhapsody or Godsent Law them. Again, this is one of those situations where if you get to the safe spot first and then try to Rhapsody afterwards, a lot of the times you won't make it in time to save someone who is about to be hit. If you want to be a selfless support player and really make sure that nobody dies to this pattern, you might have to stay behind and soak the attack while just looking for people who are not in the safe zone. So that covers most of the tips I have for Gate 1. There are some patterns I maybe didn't cover, but those ones are either pretty easy to dodge and deal with, or there's nothing special you can really do as a support. Now let's move on to Gate 2. Just like in Gate 1, there's a lot of things you can do in Gate 2 that make a huge difference, even if your party members don't really recognize what you're doing and nobody really thanks you for it. This first pattern is more bard specific, but this one is called the Onion Rings. When she starts shaking her hips and she turns yellow like this, she'll spawn a bunch of these discs that stun you and spawn red AoEs underneath you. Of course, by themselves they don't do a lot of damage, but if you get stunned with a bunch of red AoEs under you, you can take a lot of damage from this. As a bard, whenever you see her shaking her hips and turning yellow, you kind of want to cast your Guardian Tune here because it does two things. First of all, it lets everyone eat one of the rings without getting stunned, as Guardian Tune blocks one hard CC effect. It also gives damage reduction to anyone in your party so that even if they do get hit, they're not taking nearly as much damage. By the way, I'll briefly talk about Guardian Tune here because it's actually quite important going into Phase 2 and Phase 3, namely in terms of tripods. Now, I like to take the powerful protection tripod, and that's the one that gives you Guardian Tune additional damage reduction. A lot of people might be using Endless Protection, and that's the tripod that gives you a shield after your Guardian Tune expires. The reason I don't really like that tripod in Gate 2 is that there are a lot of patterns where Guardian Tune makes a huge difference. So in Gate 2, I like to save my Guardian Tune specifically for those patterns. If I'm saving my Guardian Tune, I don't really get as much value out of that tripod because that tripod is best when you're using your Guardian Tune on cooldown. If I'm saving my Guardian Tune for specific patterns anyway, I'd rather that my Guardian Tune has a massive damage reduction effect because I know I'm getting the most value out of it when I cast it. However, that's personal preference and you can continue using the Endless Protection tripod if you like it. In addition, while I have been saying that Guardian Tune is really powerful and that you should save it for these patterns, if you're a new player and maybe you're not really as good as recognizing the patterns that quickly, you can still go ahead and use your Guardian Tune on cooldown. And unfortunately, if you get one of these patterns and you want to use Guardian Tune, you'll just have to deal with the fact that you might have used it already and it might not be available. However, as you get more and more experienced and you can recognize the patterns better, I really recommend trying this approach where you save your Guardian Tune specifically for these attacks. And it's basically muscle memory at this point. Whenever I see her shaking her hips and turning yellow, I just press my Guardian Tune button. In this second clip, you can see that I actually eat the first ring without getting stunned, but a few more rings hit me and Guardian Tune only blocks 1 CC, so I end up being stunned anyway. However, Guardian Tune gives me 50% damage reduction, so you can see that even though I end up tanking all of these AoEs, with that and heavy armor, I end up taking not very much damage at all. In the third clip, you can see that even though after I Guardian Tune, my job isn't really over, I'm constantly dodging and walking around and looking for DPS who might have been stunned because they got hit by more than one ring. In this clip, I can see that my sorceress got stunned, so I walk over and I Rhapsody him just in time, also blocking one of the teleport strikes from Vykas. The next series of clips is going to show a pattern called the Suck into the Shoryuken. I know it's a little bit of a weird name, but bear with me, you'll see exactly why I called that in a second. The mechanics of this one are quite simple, but it can take a little bit of experience to be able to spot this quickly. So if you can master this pattern, consider yourself as someone who actually knows what the hell they're doing. The move is actually pretty simple. Vykas will shoot out 6 purple balls, 3 on each side of her, and then afterwards anyone in that area will get sucked in towards her. Now after she sucks people in, she'll have a chance to do this rising dragon punch kind of thing, or a Shoryuken if you're familiar with Street Fighter. Now it's actually not random when she does the Shoryuken, and the easy way to tell is that when she shoots the balls out, you need to check if the balls line up with the head and back indicator. In this first clip, you can see that the balls do line up with the head and back indicator, and when they line up, you know that she has a chance to do the Shoryuken afterwards. Of course, she can always do nothing, but it's very likely that she'll do the dragon punch. What does this mean? It means that as a bard or paladin, if you can see that the balls line up with the head and back indicators, you should be aware that she's very likely to do the Dragon Punch afterwards. So if you see someone get sucked in by the balls and the balls match up with the head and the back, you want to Rhapsody or Godsend Law them immediately so that they don't take that much damage from the follow-up. In the second clip, you can see that the balls don't match up to the head and back directions at all. So even though I get sucked in, I'm pretty calm because I know that there's going to be no follow-up. So I don't need to burn Rhapsody, I don't need to panic in spacebar, I can just calmly walk out like nothing ever happened. In the third clip, you can see again, they don't line up. So even after people get sucked in, I don't have to do anything. So now we're going to take a look at all of the different counter patterns that Vykas has in Gate 2. If you're not really experienced and you're not really confident in yourself, you actually don't need to bring Rhythm Buckshot for this fight, as most of the time, unless you're positioned very well or you're experienced, you won't be able to land the counter as a bard. This is because most of Vykas' counters come after a backstep or after a teleport, and because you don't really have any movement skills as well as a relatively short counter, unless you're experienced and you know exactly where to stand, a lot of the times you won't get the counter. However, I'll cover all the counter patterns in detail so that you guys can position yourselves better and land the counters. The first one we'll look at is the easier one of the two. This is the 4 kicks into counter pattern. So she will kick out a bunch of projectiles, and then after she's done shooting projectiles out, she'll become counterable. If you miss the counter here, she'll do a massive kind of flash kick move that does a ton of damage. So you want to be really sure that when you go in, you hit the counter or else you're taking a ton of damage in return. In the first 2 clips, you can see me doing the counter, and in the third clip, I don't know what happened here. It looked like I was in position for a counter, but it didn't go off. And as you can see here, even with heavy armor 3, I took a ton of damage and I nearly get one shot. Now before we go on, I want to talk about a kind of practice that you should build as a support in your head for doing counters. If you didn't know, after you successfully counter any boss or monster in Lost Ark, there is a 25 to 30 second internal cooldown where the boss cannot be countered again. That means that after you counter a boss, for 30 seconds, even if the boss does another normally counterable move, you will not be able to counter her as the blue flash will not appear. If you're a support who doesn't really have to worry about DPS, a really good practice to build is that every time someone hits a successful counter, whether it's you or a teammate, to quickly look at the enrage timer and calculate 30 seconds from when the counter was hit. For example, if the counter was hit at 9 minutes, you know that until the enrage timer reads 8 minutes and 30 seconds, you cannot counter the boss again. So why is this important? Well, as I mentioned before, if you go in for the counter and the boss isn't counterable, you're going to eat a ton of damage in return or die possibly in the process. As a support, if you know that the counter is on internal cooldown and you see someone going in for the counter, you can A, Rhapsody or Godsend Law them, or B, give them a warning ping or shout it out in Discord and say, there's no counter, don't go for it, you're going to die. You can see that in this clip, I know that the counter is on cooldown, so when I see the boss doing the counterable move, I do a warning ping telling people not to go near, and I also Rhapsody just in case people don't listen. So in this clip, you can see exactly what I'm talking about in action. The boss does the 4 kick into counter pattern, and when she gets up, she immediately does the backstep into charge pattern. Now we'll be looking at this pattern next, but the backstep into charge is the second of Bia's counter patterns. Whenever she does a backstep, she is counterable, and if we don't counter her, she does 2 charges in a row. Now, of course, we just countered her, so the counter is on CD for 30 seconds, and even though she does the backstep into charge pattern, you can see that the blue flash does not appear, and you have to dodge instead of going for the counter. Now, as I mentioned, every time Bia does a backstep, she's counterable, and you can actually see the third variation of this backstep into charge pattern. Whenever Vykas turns into a ball and flies around, she'll land and do an AoE explosion. However, this is a lead up into the backstep and counter pattern. So if she ever turns into an orb and flies backwards, it's very likely, and I think like 99% likely, that she's going to go into the backstep into counter combo. However, if she flies forward or to the sides, she will not follow up with the backstep combo. So you can see that in this clip, she actually does the orb teleport 2 times. The first time she flies forward, which means that she can't do the backstep counter immediately afterwards. However, she turns into an orb immediately afterwards and then flies backwards. So then right away you know that afterwards she's very likely to do backstep into counter. You can see me following her and then we get the easy counter. In this clip you can see the orb pattern again. She turns into an orb and flies backwards or towards my green back indicator, and then that means that afterwards she's very likely to do backstep into counter. However, in this clip you can also see that I go for it, and immediately when I hit Buckshot I notice that she doesn't flash blue. That means that she's actually on internal cooldown for counter, and either I did the math wrong or I wasn't keeping track at all. In this case it's because I actually didn't know if it was on cooldown or not. But immediately when I see that there's no blue flash, I just spacebar out to cancel my animation and I dodge. When you're going for the counter, it's really good if you don't burn your spacebar, especially as a bard, because like I said, if you spacebar in for the counter and something like this happens where the counter is either on cooldown or you miss the counter, you can eat a lot of damage because you have no other way to get out. If you're ever in doubt, it's better to let the counter go rather than spacebar in and trying to get a really risky counter and possibly dying for it. I hope you're still hanging in there. I know there's a lot of information to take in, but maybe watch the video a few times and I guarantee you that once you start doing the fight, you'll start to see and remember all these things. And as a support, if you can put all of these or even half of these into practice, you're going to make a huge difference in the raid. And even though people might not recognize all the small things you're doing, you'll definitely be one of the carries in the raid. The next thing we'll talk about is called the blade combo into the cross slam. And the reason I call it the blade combo is that if you've done any PvP, you know blades have that really annoying move where they tornado you and send you in the air and you take 1,000,000 damage from their combo. Well, Vykas will start off by doing a bunch of teleport slashes, and then she'll reappear in front of someone and do a tornado move. If anyone gets hit by the tornado, she'll follow up with a cross slam. This is one of the most common things for DPS players to get hit by, because after Vykas does the tornado, even though someone gets hit, they don't recognize that the cross slam is coming afterwards, so they go into DPS. Then what happens? They get hit by the cross slam, they get knocked down and take a bunch of damage. As a support, whenever you see Vykas doing the teleport slashes, you want to keep an eye out for if anyone gets tornadoed by the follow-up. As soon as you see someone get tornadoed, you want to go near her and look for an opportunity to Godson-Law or Rhapsody. In this first clip, I can see that someone gets hit by the tornado, but my War Dancer is just walking in looking to do some extra DPS. So I don't even think about it, I Rhapsody him right away, and that saves him from all the damage of the cross slam. In the second clip, my Gun Lancer gets clipped by the tornado, and I don't see anyone else in danger really, so I just Rhapsody my Gun Lancer and I save him from the damage of the cross slam here as well. You can see that this is a really common pattern that DPS players get hit by, so if you're on the ball, again, you can stop a lot of incoming damage with Rhapsody or Godson-Law. This is a little bit different from this other pattern, which I'll show in this clip. As you can see here, Vykas just does a random tornado without first doing the teleport slashes. If you don't see the teleport slashes and you just see a tornado without any startup, even if people get hit, there will be no cross slam. It's a different pattern. So if you don't see any teleport slashes, it's not going to be the blade combo. This next clip is a little bit of a break for you guys to give your brain a rest from all this information. During this pattern where you have to go to the 3 safe spots, when it's time to go to the 11 o'clock safe spot, you can actually go to the bottom where I'm standing here and dodge the 11 o'clock AoE without running to 11 o'clock. What's the point of doing this, you might ask? The answer is there's none. It's mainly just to flex and show off, just like the little photo zone in Valtan. Do this at your own risk. It gives you absolutely zero benefit, but if you screw up, you'll die and look like an idiot. Next one is the Waffle Pattern. Let's try to pick up the speed a little bit, as I know the video is getting long. So whenever I see the Waffle Pattern, this is the other one that I like to use Guardian Tune for. It's not that difficult to dodge, however, if you're learning, a lot of people have difficulty dodging the waffles, so a Guardian Tune goes a long way in mitigating the damage that your party takes in the event that they get hit by accident. Also, as you can see in this clip, one of the poops is actually facing inwards, and if you get hit by any of the purple projectiles, you actually get stunned. So the Guardian Tune not only gives damage reduction, but it will prevent stuff like this from stunning you because it lets you eat 1 CC attack. As you can see in the second clip, my sorceress gets clipped by one of the walls and gets pushed into the AoE, and they almost die from just that one combo alone. You can see that they actually live with 20% HP or so, and that's already after I've casted my Guardian Tune with 50% damage reduction. So you can see that in this clip, if I hadn't casted Guardian Tune, there was absolutely no shot that my sorceress would have lived through that. But because of Guardian Tune, he actually lives with enough HP to be able to use an HP potion. Also, since I'm paying attention, I can see that he has no roll, so I just hit him with a Rhapsody to make sure he doesn't die. Next series of clips is the dreaded purple ring. This will kill you probably more than the mechs will in this pattern. The purple ring is extremely dangerous because you don't have a lot of time to react to it, and if you don't react to it properly, it will just cause a massive AoE and everyone will die. Now, I won't go into too much detail about this mechanic as you can probably find it in other videos. However, as a support, make sure you're ready to Rhapsody or Godsend Law yourself if you find yourself stuck in the AoE. And more importantly, make sure that you're paying attention, and if you see anyone stuck in the AoE, just hit them with a Rhapsody or Godsend Law and you can save them from dying. Of course, they can also use a time stop potion, but a lot of people won't react in time. So if you're the better player and your fingers or eyes are a bit faster, you can make a huge difference in a support, saving someone who would have certainly died if you didn't Rhapsody them. Now, the last clip we'll look at for phase 2 is the Shock Ring. This is, again, one of the most important patterns that you want to be saving your Guardian Tune for, because the Shock Ring does a ton of damage, and if anyone's caught by it, it's very likely that they'll die if you don't do something. So the Shock Ring works like this. The pattern is out safe, then in safe again, and then out safe for the very last one. There's 4 shock rings in a row, and if you get hit by any of the shock rings, you get electrocuted and lose control of your character. That basically means if you get stunned during any of the shock rings, you end up eating multiple pulses of the electricity, and since each of them does a ton of damage, it's very likely that you die if you get hit by them. You can actually hear the audio cue for the shock ring before the visual cue comes out. That means that as soon as you hear the electricity sound, as a bard, you can immediately press your Guardian Tune. That way, even if people get caught out, let's say they're in an animation or they're not paying attention, they can actually soak the first attack of the shock ring without getting stunned. That alone will give them enough time to react and spacebar accordingly to get into the safe zone. Okay, now let's go into phase 3, and before you go into phase 3, listen to this. There's 2 things you want to do for phase 3. One, you want to go to Guardian Tune and you want to unskill the third tripod, the CC block. You do not want the CC block in phase 3. You also want to take the line stun, this one, so that you can line stun people out of the mind control. The reason you don't want CC block is because if you have Guardian Tune up with CC block and someone gets mind controlled and you have this shit on them, your Guardian Tune eats the sleep bomb. So as a bard, if you don't want to grief, you want to make sure that you just unskill the last tripod. Now bear with me, we're almost done. Before I get into phase 3, you should know that there's actually not as many support specific tips or gimmicks that I can give you. A lot of phase 3 just comes down to being able to do the mechanics and being able to dodge the patterns. In phase 3, because you have the desire gauge, even though you save people from damage, it really doesn't do that much in the long run, because if they get hit by too many attacks, no matter how little or how much damage they take, they will get mind controlled, and that is not good for your raid. So unfortunately, as a support, unlike in Gate 1 and Gate 2, there's not as much you can do, but I'll still try to go over some tips that you can do for Gate 3. This is the first pattern that we'll look at. This is when she swings her sword once and then jumps up in the air and does a slam. If she ever swings her sword once and does a slam, you want to be standing behind her, and after the slam, you want to go to the other side. That's because she'll jump up and do a second slam in the reverse direction. So when you see one swing of the sword and she flies up, get behind her, then after the slam, get behind her again. A lot of people don't know how to recognize this pattern, and they'll dodge the first slam but not the second, so after you get to the safe spot, you can just Rhapsody them. However, if you ever see her swing her sword 4 times, there will only be 1 slam, so after you dodge the first one, you're good to go. By now, if you didn't know, there is a typing mechanic in Vykas. It's quite famous, but basically, if anyone fails the typing mechanic, Vykas will do this massive AoE explosion that does a ton of damage. It actually does more damage the more people fail. However, even if only 1 or 2 people fail, it still does quite a bit of damage. And so the best way to survive through this is by having your supports use their awakening ability. Now, depending on your cooldown and the DPS of your raid, if you use your awakening right at the start of the fight, you might not have it available again for this mechanic. If that's the case, you'll have to make do with Rhapsody or Godsend Law, but that just mitigates damage and it doesn't actually give you the shield, so you'll end up taking damage regardless. It's up to you whether you want to risk it. Personally, if I think that my group has a lot of damage and will push the boss fast enough, I'll just save my awakening just in case someone fails this mechanic. Now I know it's in Korean, but as you can see, after the typing mechanic, a guide message pops up. The message will tell you exactly how many people have failed, If anyone has failed, it will show you the number of people that have failed, and if that number is greater than 0 but less than 4, you should immediately just cast your Awakening to prevent the damage from the explosion. The reason that the number 4 matters is that if 4 or more people fail the typing mechanic, it doesn't even matter what you do because you will always die to the explosion, so you might as well just restart. Now, other than that, there's not too much until you get to 55 bars, which is where the Tentacles spawn. This is kind of important. As a support, you don't really want to have gauge because you don't do that much damage, and a support DPSing down a tentacle is not really that effective. So rather than eating the balls and stealing them from the DPS who actually need to keep refilling their gauge, you just want to dodge and keep your gauge low while providing attack buffs and damage buffs to them so they can kill the tentacles faster. As a support, depending on how fast you generate identity bar, you really want to make sure you have a 3-bar courage, or if you're a paladin, you want to make sure you have your aura available for the 55-bar tentacle mechanic. For my bard, it takes around 40 seconds to fill up the 3-bar from 0, so I'll judge it accordingly based on the DPS of the raid to make sure I have bars saved up. When the tentacles spawn, you want to immediately use your identity damage buff and then your attack buff, and then just dodge the balls while playing your guardian tune and making sure that the DPS aren't taking too much damage. At the same time, because you don't really have anything else to do, you should be paying attention to the gauges of the different DPSs. If you can see that someone's about to get mind controlled, you can actually get ready to sleep bomb them or use Prelude of Storm to stun them out of the charm. One of the most common wipes to this mechanic is that someone gets charmed, starts attacking the raid, interrupting everyone long enough so that they don't have enough time to kill the tentacles. If you're a support and you're paying attention, you can basically insta-CC anyone that gets mind controlled, preventing that from happening to you. So you can see that in this clip, I get ganked by famous Shadowhunter content creator Shandamon or Shandamon, and so I can just dash away and stun him with Prelude, knocking him out of the mind control. In general, that's why we take the line stun tripod for Prelude, because it gives us an extra range to CC people who get mind controlled. The casting time is a lot faster than sleep bomb, so in an emergency, it's better if you just Prelude first. In this clip, I can see that somebody has an almost full gauge in the last phase, and because I know that your gauge slowly increases in that phase, I'm already ready to CC him, and as soon as he's mind controlled, I just instantly cast Prelude and stun him. Now, this is a hard mode only mech. As a support, because you don't need any of the balls during the tentacle phase, when the boss phases and goes into the last 35-bar Meteor mechanic, you can eat one of the balls that spawns at the corners, and it's very free because the balls give you gauge. However, because you have no gauge to begin with, you're a perfect candidate to soak one of the balls here. So just eat one of them, mash spacebar, and get out. Now we just have one more thing to talk about, and this is the Medusa pattern. So if you didn't know, Vykas has a Medusa attack, and the Medusa basically spawns when she has these black little squiggly lines coming out of her. To dodge this, all you need to do is look away. However, if anyone is looking at Vykas when the Medusa finishes, she does a massive AoE attack that does a ton of damage and gives everyone a ton of desire gauge. A really good practice is that when you're looking away for the Medusa, just keep your finger on time stop, and as soon as you can see her gathering energy afterwards, it means someone has failed, at which point you should immediately press time stop. So what does it have to do with your Bard Awakening? As you know, when you cast your Awakening, you're kind of locked in place. Unlike with other skills, you cannot cancel out of an Awakening with a spacebar. So as a Bard, it's a really good habit. Before you cast your Symphonia in Vykas Gate 3, you want to look away from the boss before you cast Symphonia. Now the main reason is that as a Bard, you have the advantage of Symphonia not needing to be cast in any direction because it's a huge AoE. Paladins don't really have that luxury as they need to target their AoE on the ground, so they can't do the same tactic. All you need to do is auto attack away from the boss and then press Symphonia. That way, even if Vykas does Medusa while you're in Symphonia, you're already facing away from her, so you won't trigger it while you're stuck in the animation. However, you might not always have the presence of mind to look away before you cast your Awakening every time, so I'll teach you a little trick called the pet cancel. And this is actually a way to cancel out of your Symphonia while you're in the animation. All you need to do is open your pet inventory, click remote repair, and then cancel out of the menus, and it will interrupt the animation of any Awakening skill. Of course, the default is Alt P, which is basically impossible to hit quickly. So in order to do this trick effectively, you need to rebind your pet hotkey to the tilde or anything that you can hit quickly. To break it down, it's pet hotkey, click repair, escape, then pet hotkey again. There's no real reason for this, all you basically need to do is open your pet inventory and click repair and then close the menus. However, if you're mashing escape when you close the menus, you can actually open the escape menu instead afterwards, which will introduce a ton of lag and basically screw you over because you're trying to cancel out of your animation. Because my tilde key is right under escape, to sum it up, I just hit tilde, click the button, hit escape, and then tilde again, and that closes all the menus. And if you do it quickly enough, it looks something like this. As you can see, if I press my awakening and then quickly do the pet cancel, I cancel out of the animation. However, keep in mind that this still uses your awakening and puts it on cooldown, and you don't get the shield or any of the bonuses, so only do this in a dire emergency. Like I said, the best habit is to auto attack away from the boss, facing away before you cast Symphonia. That way, even if Medusa happens, you won't get griefed by it, and you don't have to cancel your awakening, wasting your ability. However, like I said, in an emergency, you can use the pet cancel like this to cancel out of Symphonia and look away from the boss. This can also be used in other situations. For example, if you cast your Symphonia during a Valtan grab or something like that, you can cancel out of it and live. Alright, that's gonna be it for this one. I know it's a bit long, but I hope you got something useful out of this. Again, you don't have to learn all of these little tips and tricks, but if you can keep these in mind and put some of them into practice, I guarantee you will make a huge difference as a support in the Vykas Legion raid. Like I said before, if you're interested in listening to me talk about the different mechanics and teaching you how to do the fight, the link is in the description below. You can always come find me on Twitch, like and subscribe, all that stuff, blah 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 blah. Anyway, good luck in Vykas. This has been IU. See you next time. Bye you!